Hi, I'm Ken Cruz. I'm retired. I'm living in High Point, North Carolina. And one of my ministries is helping churches that want to reach out to new people. And whenever I do that, the question comes up about what about greeters for the services? So I put this little video together. And though I'm talking mainly about Christmas Eve, virtually everything I have to say applies to any service. And I want you to know how important the ministry of greeting is. It is what establishes the tone for the first-time guest. And yet, most churches do a very poor job of greeting on Christmas Eve. And it's not for lack of effort or lack of intent. It's rather that we don't have greeters that are properly trained, and we have too few of them. Typically, the greeter that greets on Christmas Eve is a regular at this ministry. It's somebody who knows most of the people in the congregation, has a big smile and a cheery personality. You know, that's good. Those are good things. But what happens is the person who has missed most of the year because they've been ill or whatever comes, and of course you want to talk with them. And the second person in line is someone who has been telling you for a solid month that they were bringing their grandchildren on Christmas Eve. So you better acknowledge the grandchildren. And then the third person online is a brand new guest. Now, even if we give each of them the same amount of time, we don't really have the time to have any kind of conversation with the guest, much less invite them to find the nursery or restroom. So my suggestion is look back at your records from previous years and be optimistic about this year. Try to guess how many guests you might have and have one greeter for every guest you expect. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of people, and most of your members say, oh, I'm too shy to do that. But what I'm going to do is give you some exact words they can use to make it all easy. And honestly, this ministry takes maybe 15 minutes before the service and maybe 10 minutes after the service. So it's not a big commitment, even on Christmas Eve. Now, you also need a couple ushers. The greeter and the usher are very different ministries. The greeter should not touch a bulletin. And the reason is simple. If the person is standing at the door to the worship space handing out bulletins, they're not chatting with the new guest. They're not taking the guest to the nursery. They're not doing those special things. So what is a greeter's ministry? I like the phrasing that the greeter's job is to make the new person feel comfortable. That suggests a servant role, which is very scriptural, but it goes way beyond simply saying hello. Where should the greeter stand? I would say as far from the entrance to the worship space as is possible in your church. The entrance to the worship space is going to be crowded with people, and it does not encourage interaction. In fact, I like having the greeters near the parking lot outside when the weather and the physical space permits. This gives a wonderful impression that we are excited for the guests to be there. Think of the father in the prodigal son parable. The greeter, of course, should be standing somewhere where there's good light so it doesn't look like they're lurking. And the greeter, no matter where they stand, inside or outside, should have a very large name tag on. See, researchers agree that Americans consider anything under about 3 or 4 feet to be personal space. So the first-time guest doesn't want to come closer than that to read the name tag. A name tag should be readable from at least 4 to 5 feet away. Too many churches use those nice little metal name tags that are impossible to read. Now comes the part which so many people become nervous about. A person walks up and you're not sure. Are they new? Are they occasional worshipers? Are they maybe a founding member who just hasn't been around for a while? Well, what I've done is memorize exactly 10 words. Hi, I am Ken. So glad you are here tonight. Now notice what I did. First, I offered something of myself. Even though I had that big name tag on, I offered my name. Second, notice the phrasing. I did not say, welcome to St. Swithin's, because that says I don't think they've ever been there before. And if they've attended before, that can be pretty insulting. And I avoided saying, glad you are worshiping with us. See, the word us says you're not part of the community. And again, if you've attended before, that's pretty off-putting. Now, if the response is something like, sure, I know you can, I just simply take the blame on myself. Great, but I'm always afraid people have memory as bad as mine. Typically, the person will respond to your greeting and give you some extremely valuable information. It probably will include their names. Now, take notes mentally and write them down as soon as you can, which is another reason for having several greeters. It provides time to make a note. I can tell you my old prayer book is covered with the names of guests and Post-it notes that I use to write it on. Now, the person might say something like, we just moved into town, and that's wonderful because it gives you the possibility of saying, glad you're here, where did you come from? Or they may say, this is our first time here at the church. Now, a mistake I made was I would sometimes respond to that with, oh good, where did you move from? Which sounds good, except if you realize that person may be a lifelong resident of the town and just hasn't been going to church, or maybe they're actually members at another church and are trying your church out. So that can make them uncomfortable. So instead, I just jump on to my next question. Have you attended an Episcopal church before? Again, they're likely to give you some valuable information between the simple yes or no. Now, if their answer is no, your response depends on your church's materials. If you use one of those all-inclusive bulletins, you can simply say something like, oh, you won't have any problem. Everything you need is in the bulletin. If your church uses one of the more traditional, simple bulletins, you might say something like, well, it's actually very simple. Everything that is said is in the prayer book, that smaller book, and the music is in the hymnal. If you have any questions, feel free to ask anyone around you, because there's a good chance they were confused their first time too. Now, very important, if someone comes up and they have children, get the children's names and acknowledge them. Talk to them for a moment. You see, almost always, the children will be a major factor in deciding whether or not the family is going to return. If the children are uncomfortable and feel excluded, I can just about bet that family's not coming back. And if the children are happy, I'll bet you'll see that family again. Now, if they have an infant with them, I like to say, you're welcome to have your child stay with you, or I can show you where our staff nursery is. Now, I fully appreciate that some congregations and some clergy do not want children in the service, so double check what the policy is at your church. And aside, on Christmas Eve, have a staff nursery available at every service if you want young families. You see, if a young family comes in at one of the services, even at 11 o'clock, and there's no nursery, you're saying you don't want them back. Now, my guess is some people are going to be a bit annoyed at this last comment because it sounds so PC. But it's absolutely true. We never used to worry about such things, but ask yourself, is it worth annoying someone so they never are willing to come back again just because you don't want to change your language? See, a habit I've worked hard to change is to automatically look first at the man and stick my hand out to shake hands with him. When I do that, some people, and particularly some women, will infer that I am saying that the woman is somehow lesser. So there's a couple possibilities. One is don't shake hands with either. Or the second is make absolutely sure you offer your hand to both. Always make absolutely sure to look at both people right in the eyes. Try to involve both in the conversation. Now, to break up my habit of focusing on the man, I make a mental effort to put 55% of my eye contact time on the woman. You know, my background's engineering, so I think in those quantitative terms. All right, all this I've just said has taken maybe 60 seconds. Now, if you started outside with them near the parking lot, you're just walking along with them toward the building. If inside, you might have gently moved them out of the primary traffic flow for the moment. If there is time, and if they've given you a place to continue the conversation, they've said something, go ahead. And again, engaging the child is very important. If you have indicated they would like to bring a child to the nursery, take them there. They are your only assignment, so give them your full attention. And if you have a young woman as a greeter, invite her over to take them to the nursery. A mother with a young child is going to be much more comfortable walking to the nursery with another young woman, and that's the possibility of making a connection, which is what we're trying to do. If they ask for a restroom, again, take them there. Many of our churches are set up so you need GPS to find the restroom. My pattern is to take them to where I can point out the restroom and then stop. It feels just a little bit creepy to take them all the way to the door. And if there's more than one turn to get back to the worship space, I would say something like, I've gotten lost trying to find my way back, so I'll just wait here for you. Now, I hope all of your restrooms have changing tables, but if not, and if they have a young child, ask if they need the changing table so you can take them to the right place. If they never make a specific need clear, it never hurts to say something like, is there anything I can do for you? Stay aware of the time. Try to lead them to the door to the worship at least 2 to 3 minutes before the service. But if it takes longer to get to the restroom or the nursery, assure them that walking in a couple minutes late is not a problem. And as they leave you at the door to the worship place, please don't say, I hope you enjoy the service. See, that says what we're intending is entertainment. Rather, say something like, we hope this will be a meaningful service for you. It's polite and it puts the emphasis where it belongs. All right, you've guided them to the worship space in plenty of time and they've gone in. If there's still time, go back to the greeting area and see if there's another guest waiting. At least 2 of the greeters should stay in the welcome area, in the narthex, until at least the end of the psalm. The point is that if someone's coming in late, we still want to show them that we welcome them. In fact, being outside is a wonderful image. Any parent will tell you that being late is not unusual. In fact, having a person standing outside 5 minutes after just feels so good. Assure them that being late is not a problem. Heard an interesting comment from one church. They said they blocked off the back pew until the service started so that people coming in late didn't have to go all the way up to the front and feel so uncomfortable. Interesting idea. After the service, any greeter who met somebody should come to the narthex during the closing hymn. This is why it's so important to make notes. Greet the people by name, the children especially. Do not ask if they enjoyed the service or anything like that. Rather, just a very simple, Joan, John, Jacob, thank you again for coming. We're simply acknowledging them. I make a point of not standing in their path, particularly after the 11 o'clock service. People want to get home. But standing nearby, so if they want to say more, I'm available, and yet they don't feel trapped. If you can introduce them to another member, that's great, especially if there's a connection. Sam, Peter just moved from New York. I don't know if 2 of you lived anywhere near each other. That gives them something to talk about. Now, your final task is to write down some notes and leave them for the clergy. Do it now, or you're going to forget. It doesn't have to be much. Just some quick notes. A young family, Joan, John, and Jacob, said they're not familiar with the Episcopal service. He grew up Baptist and she didn't go to church. I don't know if they just moved here or what. I'm guessing Jacob's in middle school. If you learn more in bed, that's great, but share what you did learn. That gives the clergy or whoever follows up with the guest an opening for conversation. All right, way back at the beginning, I said I would talk about what's most important for the greeters to do. The most important task is to get the guest's contact information. See, if we don't have that contact information, the church has zero influence on whether they will stay in touch and whether or not they will return. I mean, your guest could leave the service saying, hey, that was really pretty nice, we should come back. But haven't we all said something like that at times and then never followed up? Life gets busy, a month passes, and we forget. But if the church has their contact information, we can at least make the effort to invite them to other events. Now remember, the key is always be assertive, but never aggressive. We're going to script that as appropriate for your church and for you. I like something along the lines of, we would love to have your contact information so we can reach out to answer any questions you might have and, get to know you a little bit. And we promise not to sell your information. Procedurally, I've grown to appreciate what I call two-headed approach. That there's a guest book in the narthex that the greeter can encourage them to sign, but there's also something in the pew or the bulletin. If the clergy are willing, they include at some point in the service a welcome like, welcome to everyone and a special welcome to anyone who's here for the first time today. I would love to get to know you a little bit, so if you can leave your information, that would be wonderful. Now I'm going to get in trouble with your budget committee for this, but I think it makes a great impression if the clergy says, if this is your first time, please feel free to make your contact information your gift to us tonight and put that in the basket rather than any money. The greeter in the narthex after the service might add something like, somebody will call you in a couple days is just see if you have any questions. Now, my opinion, asking them again to leave their contact information, that would be the third time, that's getting on the aggressive end rather than just being assertive. As I said, it's all very easy. You should change every word I have just said so it fits you and your situation. But remember, this is an extremely important ministry. You are setting the tone for the entire service. We all know how important that first impression will be. Now, if you're watching it as a group, you might want to take a couple minutes and just role play some situations. One of you be the greeter and one of you be a guest and see what's happening. Whatever. Blessings on your ministry.